You're watching or listening to Strangers in Space, and for the next 45 minutes, maybe, nominally, we're going to be previewing the 3 David Tennant specials, so you don't have to. Hi, I'm JR.
I'm Dylan.
And I'm John.
And truth be told, this is just because things are happening quite fast now. We're in November. This is just an excuse for a catch up and a throw forwards, because with the quiz being on the feed, on the audio feed at least every day next week, and having been on the audio feed this week, things are a little bit squeezed. So this will probably go out on video on Saturday evening and on audio on Sunday morning. So there's going to be like 8 days worth of episodes in a row, I think. But really, it's just a chance to catch up and to give some opinions about what we're expecting or what we're hoping for or how we feel about how things are. I'm going to start with the subject of Daleks, because a couple of things have come up about Daleks. Clearly, the first one is, as we were recording last time, they sent out a press release with the news that the Daleks, the colour cut down version of the Daleks, was going to be the thing that was going to be broadcast on the 23rd of November. So that was the 23rd November date that Russell T Davies was mentioning. I mean, we'll talk about the Daleks and the cut down and the colour aspect of it in a minute. The 23rd is the anniversary, is a sort of, well, less Doctor Who than you've known it, kind of a slightly odd, and in a way that you don't like it, a slightly odd way to actually give us an anniversary present, given the episodes don't happen until, a couple of days thereafter.
I mean, there was always going to be something on the anniversary, and this seems to fit it. I know there's been mixed responses, but I think as an accessible bit of old Doctor Who, it can only sort of bring people in. I'm not saying there's going to be a bunch of kids watching it, but it's the sort of thing that the more sort of casual viewer might go, oh, I'll check out this new bit of Doctor Who in anticipation for Saturday's episode. So I think it's a bit of harmless fun, unless you go on the Ian Levine forum, in which case it's not.
Oh, I don't know. I don't know how he's taken it. I haven't seen that. I've got to say, I think maybe some of the younger fans will. I think fans of the new series will think probably, oh, they've done something with the old series that we know. That the whole sort of London 1965 thing was fairly big in fandom, sort of made ripples throughout fandom. So even fans who are not necessarily acquainted with 1960s Doctor Who, or only vaguely acquainted with it, might find this an interesting concept, at least.
It's a good in, and I think that general Tales of the TARDIS section of the Whoniverse is something that's really going to grow, not necessarily just with more Tales of the TARDIS, but things like this. They've already said they're doing another colorization next year, and it's about making that old stuff accessible to a newer audience. So while I don't expect loads of new fans to be tuning in on the night, I think it's something that will gain an audience over time on the iPlayer.
Quick predictions then. If next year they're going to do something with fewer grey corridors, maybe the Sensorites?
To make the Sensorites that dull. It's a challenge.
The Sensorites cut down to 12 minutes. Why not? Sorry, John, I cut you off.
And the emphasis on the whole anniversary special, I think people were thinking at the start of it, oh, it's all about Tennant and Tate coming back. It's all about celebrating Russell's old era. And really, that emphasis that's been there from getting everything up on iPlayer, Tales of the TARDIS, this Dalek, it's to make that old stuff far more accessible to the new generation. And I think that's probably the best thing they could have done for an anniversary, to be honest.
Absolutely.
It's the 60th. Insofar as we can know, the BBC didn't really have any plans for a 60th anniversary celebration for Doctor Who. Presumably, plans would have come along, but probably it would have been something a lot more muted than this. There probably wouldn't. There was no indication that there would be an anniversary special. The whole point with what Russell T Davies has done is that he and Tennant and Tate wanted to get together, and that had nothing to do with the anniversary. It was that they wanted to get together. The timing just worked out that they could do this at the anniversary. So really, these 3 specials aren't about the anniversary. He's made them about the anniversary, I think, a bit by including Star Beast, villain from the 60s. So something from the comics, something from the 60s. But really, they're not anniversary specials in the way we would think from the Three Doctors, Five Doctors, Day of the Doctor.
I don't know. I mean, obviously it did come from that lockdown thing, but Russell said in like his show notes or something at one point, letter from the showrunner, he said, we really wanted to do it. So I got in contact with the BBC and said, I don't know what your plans are for the anniversary, but we'd love to do an episode. And that turned into him running the series again. So I think there's a certain angle of anniversary, and we'll come on to it later, but I don't know. I don't think we'll know until we see the episodes how much it feels like what has been shoehorned into what, whether there's anniversary that's been shoehorned into Tennant specials or Tennant shoehorned into anniversary episodes.
Yeah, I think my point is more that the idea for these came up before the anniversary idea was then folded into the concept. So I'm not saying there won't be anything to do with an anniversary, but what I'm saying is the germ of the idea, it didn't begin with the idea, oh, there's an anniversary, let's do something for the anniversary. It began with the idea of, let's do something, oh, it's nearly the anniversary, let's do it for that. So what I'm saying is that I think basically all the stuff that we're getting is kind of bonus over and above. It would just have been maybe a fairly regular year in some ways. So I think if this hadn't have come up, maybe somebody else would have taken over as showrunner. Maybe Doctor Who would be a bit less high profile. Maybe there would have been a series earlier this year or something, because the way it's worked is everything's got shoved back. By the time Ncuti Gatwa's first series goes on, it'll be 3 years since the Jodie Whittaker one, more or less. So I think what I'm saying is we need to sort of, I'm kind of retooling my expectations of what the anniversary is around the fact that somebody's come in and given all this stuff, done all these things as kind of extra. So when Russell T Davies says, oh, we had a last minute idea to do these sort of 6 shorts to bring in all these old companions and doctors, that's like, actually, 6 months ago, that was never on the cards. So that is bonus. Everything is bonus, is what I'm saying. So the Daleks cut down colour thing is, somebody said, well, we need something. What can we do? And here's actually a nice thing that we can do.
I think that's been in the works for about a year, though, I think they said.
Right. But the Tennant Tate specials, right, has been in the works for a lot longer than it. Yeah, absolutely. So, I'm not saying this is all last minute stuff, but what I am saying is this is all stuff that we wouldn't necessarily have had if the Tennant and Tate thing hadn't happened. And what I'm saying is the Tennant and Tate thing, they said, let's do something. Oh, look, the anniversary is just around the corner. And it's the point at which they say the anniversary is just around the corner that everybody suddenly says, OK, let's do this for the anniversary and let's make the anniversary a thing. And then let's do lots of other things for the anniversary. So I think what I'm saying is without the Tennant and Tate conversation over the lockdown, we might not have had much of a 60th anniversary at all.
I think we probably would have got a special of some sort. I'd always thought, and this isn't me sort of being revisionist, it is on my podcast before Jodie even left. I thought, I genuinely thought you'd probably get an old Doctor and an old showrunner returning for 1 or 2 specials. Not necessarily Russell T Davies and David Tennant, but a Matt Smith or a David Tennant or something like that. When you don't have a current show and you're still pitching it to different people, it just seems like the most sensible placeholder.
Absolutely. Well, the other thing about the Daleks as well is Russell T Davies has kind of basically said, no Daleks for a few years. Let's do the next few years without Daleks.
Allegedly.
Yeah. Well, what do you think? It's been a year since we've last seen them, and it'll probably, by the time Ncuti's first season airs, it'll probably be nearer to 2 years. They will have done their couple of years without Daleks, assuming there's none in these specials.
It wouldn't surprise me if there was like a guest appearance of some kind, a little cameo or something.
Yeah.
Like in The Waters of Mars. Which in our feed brought up the conversation of the whole sort of conspiracy theory that there's this contract that's been around for the Daleks. Should we do this just for a few minutes? This, whether they're could or would have been a contract which said the Daleks need to be on screen every year, and whether that would still hold or whether that would have changed. So the way I look at it is this. So the sort of circumstantial evidence is we know that there was a conversation, and back in 2004, where the Terry Nation estate and the BBC weren't agreeing terms about whether the Daleks would be used. Now, and John, you threw this into the conversation. Somebody stepped in and said, the BBC, take this more seriously. If you want to use the Daleks, you've got to actually sit down and negotiate. You can't just say, I think my point was, at that point, the BBC actually have to come to terms with the Terry Nation estate. And my point is this, that if you come to terms, and this is a business deal, this is not an artistic deal. This isn't the Terry Nation estate saying, we want you to use the Daleks in this way or that way. This is the Terry Nation estate saying, what goes on behind the scenes is the business thing, and that's our agreement with the BBC. It's a business agreement. It's not an artistic agreement. It's a business agreement. So what I'm thinking is, in 2004, nobody really has much in the way of expectations about whether this will be a success. Everybody hopes it'll be a success. Nobody can guarantee it'll be a success. Everybody's thinking, well, we've got 1 year. If we're lucky and we do it well, it carries on. If we're not lucky or we don't do it well, 1 year and done. I think it's not beyond the realms of possibility that lawyers acting for the Terry Nation estate, talking to the BBC, have something put into the contract that stipulates, I don't know whether it would be, oh, you must have the Daleks on screen every year, but it might be that the BBC has to pay a stipend to the Terry Nation estate for every year that the new series is going, where they're using the Daleks, in an ongoing sense, not necessarily annually, but whatever. There might be a stipulation there that as long as the new series is ongoing and the Daleks are a part of it, the Terry Nation estate gets a stipend. I think the interesting thing that happens then is the BBC sign off on that, the production team sign off on that, and they say, yeah, right, fair enough. We pay the same as we pay David Tennant. No, the same as we'll pay Peter Capaldi an annual fee for being the Doctor, regardless of whether there's 10 episodes broadcast that year or, as in 2016, 1. We're not saying that in 2016 Peter Capaldi doesn't get paid for being Doctor Who, right? He gets paid for being Doctor Who. When the episodes are broadcast is a slightly different thing. But what I'm saying is, so there's an ongoing payment maybe to the Terry Nation estate, and this is all speculation, but this to me is just how a business transaction works. They make an ongoing payment, and then somebody somewhere says, we're paying for the Daleks on an annual basis. And the BBC charter stipulates that you have to use what you pay for. Oh, we'd better use the Daleks on an annual basis. So it might not be that there's a contract somewhere that says the production team have to use the Daleks every year, but it might equally be that the production team's interpretation of what the contract does say is that the BBC have to use the Daleks every year. Now, I'm not one of these, oh, wow, mad conspiracies. RTD signed off to use the Daleks every year, and that's why there's cameos and stories and all this kind of thing. And that's why, but neither RTD nor Stephen Moffat at any point in those first 10 years said there wasn't a contract. If they were asked, they always flubbed it and said, well, why wouldn't we use the Daleks?
Stephen Moffat did say, didn't he, that he was resting the Daleks at one point as well, and that was around the time that they sort of had their cameos again, which leans into this theory of the Daleks that have to be used. But he certainly, I know Mark Donaldson isn't here and wanted to talk about this a bit more, but I always felt that Moffat was not somebody interested in telling Dalek stories very regularly.
No, absolutely. And yet he has them on screen every single calendar year, even the year when there is no stories at all, let alone a Dalek story. There's one Christmas special. They even broadcast the Daleks then. So, I mean, regardless of whether it's in a contract that there has to be an appearance fee,
Yeah.
the Terry Nation estate still gets an appearance fee for 2016 because the BBC broadcast something with Daleks in it.
That's the Bill Potts skit, is it?
Yeah, that went out in 2016, remember?
What I would imagine is, though, if there is a contract in place that has some sort of stipulation, it's not going to be in perpetuity. So it must be up for renegotiation every now and then, especially now that it is no longer the BBC producing Doctor Who. It's Bad Wolf.
Well, absolutely.
So,
two things have changed.
Yeah.
Two things have changed. The first thing that changed was initially there was Doctor Who every year. It was an annual thing with a series every year. And then after 2008, I mean, and people can argue the toss over whether there's an annual series or a biannual series or whatever. Since 2008, there has been an average a series every 18 months. So that's the first thing that changes. Doctor Who goes from being a yearly thing for 4 years to something that comes every 18 months. And that's how it's been for the last 12 or 13 years, whatever it's been. So that in itself is a change to whatever any such contract might have said. But then you're right. The other thing that changes is BBC Studios basically takes over production. So the BBC Charter, if my thing about the Charter, my speculation about the Charter is the correct, that's kind of changed anyway. When BBC Studios take over, they no longer have to abide quite by the letter of the law in the same way as the BBC as a producer would have to abide by the letter of the law. But yeah, the fact that it's every 18 months. So you would imagine that whatever the original contract was, it would have been a contract for 5 years or 10 years, predicated upon whether the series is still being made, right? So if the series is not being made, the contract comes to an end. But if the series is still in production, I guess, let's say the original contract is for 10 years, gets renegotiated around 2015, and the new renegotiation is, well, the Doctor Who series isn't on every year, so let's have a contract that says there's a payment, by quota according to how much Doctor Who is being made, rather than an annual payment for a series that's no longer annual in nature. So what I'm saying is, I think the contract would have been renegotiated. And here's the funny thing. That's around the time at which RTD and Stephen Moffat stop saying, well, why wouldn't we use the Daleks? They're great. And start saying, there is no annual contract. Well, yeah, because now the contract's renegotiated for every 18 months rather than for every 12. So that's still not quite answering the question, is it? I don't know. But all the conspiracy theories aside, it makes business sense for the Terry Nation estate to have something in that original contract that guarantees them a certain amount of income, as opposed to an ad hoc agreement about as and when, right?
And you've also got to think it's probably a broader licensing deal, because Daleks are all over Doctor Who merch and things like that. So it's not just use within the television series. It's, lunch boxes or annuals or whatever you're picking up. It's about keeping the brand of the Daleks current and making money in many different ways.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it wouldn't necessarily be, oh, we'll use it every year. It's keeping them in, at the forefront of the show, maybe, in the public eye. So, you get that ongoing income for the Nation estate. That's what I think it will be about.
Well, and how do you do that? By keeping them on screen, right?
Yeah.
So,
but not necessarily every year. They weren't on air in 2018, was it, for instance?
Well, that's what I mean. But the series isn't on air every year now.
No,
so
not at all. There was a series and there wasn't a Dalek story that year. But obviously there was the year
there
after.
was, but it was just on the first day of the very next year.
It was in the year.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. These days, it wouldn't be annual. It would be every 18 months, wouldn't it? As long as you get the Daleks on screen once every 18 months, you're basically still sort of adhering to the same rules. It's just that you've changed the length of time from 12 months to 18 months. And I think that's basically still held true. So anyway, that was a conversation that came up because of what Russell T Davies said. And I don't think we've ever had that conversation on this podcast. So I just thought it was worth bringing it up and talking it over a bit. Let's change, unless either of you got more you want to add on that subject. Let's change to something a little different.
Cool.
So, Dylan, you brought this up just before we started recording. Oh no! Before we go to that, just to point out, the Daleks Cut Down is being released on Blu-ray and DVD.
Yeah,
in February.
Yeah, that's kind of nice. I wasn't sure that would happen. I didn't think it necessarily would, but
they're going to exploit it in every way possible, and they know that there'll be people out there that want the Steelbook, the Blu-ray, and the DVD to go on their shelves. So why not?
Absolutely. So, to avoid grey
fans
corridors,
these days.
are we suggesting that the next one they might be the Space Museum? I'm going to pull this joke until Dylan stops laughing.
Well, Tomb of the Cybermen has been rumoured, but that is very much grey corridors and silver things. But then they're not following the original colour palettes of any colour photos that might exist. So, I mean, who knows? Maybe those walls will be a luminous green if they do that.
Yeah, I mean, it's daft. It's daft for them to stick to the original, colour scheme, because you're talking about they're not necessarily thinking about what looks good against each other in contrast. It's for a monochrome TV series.
Oh,
it makes sense for them to change it now.
Is the TARDIS console white or that off-green colour that it was painted to look white? Oh, there's going to be a big debate about that online.
Yeah, fandom controversies.
I mean, for my money,
is going to be fun, isn't it?
It would be utterly stupid to do it green for my money, but
Me
there
too.
we go.
I agree entirely.
My vote is for the War Games as the next one, because if you see those colour photos of those sets, they looked absolutely fantastic. I know all the War Machines would be quite interesting, I think. Swinging 60s London.
I think the Ice Warriors down to about 25 minutes should be interesting.
Wheel in space. Next up.
JR start a rumour. They found them all.
Dylan, tell me about what's happening on Channel 5.
I know, who would have thunk it? So we've got this 90-minute documentary, Doctor Who, 60 Years of Secrets and Scandals, 90 minutes. It features Sophie
90 minutes with adverts, so that's 60 minutes, right?
True. Sophie Aldred, Nicola Bryant, Fraser Hines, Boris Hussein, Ian Levine. I mean, what a lineup already.
That's a hell of an orgy.
a really awkward one, and it seems like it's going to be sort of behind the scenes gossip that we all know, obviously, but a mainstream audience doesn't. They almost lost the Daleks when they brought the reboot back, and Sophie Aldred's stunt. It mentions stunts going dangerously wrong. The most interesting.
Deborah Watling's knickers.
Absolutely, yeah. This is the point where Fraser Hines finally gets cancelled after years of telling those stories. But the most interesting thing in there was it talks about, which obviously piques my interest, the straight-to-video 90s fan spin-offs that were surprisingly more raunchy than they should have been. So I think we might get a clip of Zygon on national television.
They should show the full horror.
I don't think they should show the full horror. I mean, it'd only take a few seconds of a clip to show the full horror, as we all know, having all seen it, right?
Absolutely.
And then it also says the backlash of the show being cancelled. It's funny to think that 18 months was too long to wait back in the day, considering the conversation we've just had about Doctor Who being
3 years.
Yeah. But
3 years between series, and that's RTD's fault. RTD needs cancelling.
But this is the sort of programme that I know Doctor Who fans are going to whinge about and go, we know it all. But it's exactly the sort of programme that my girlfriend will sit down and watch and absolutely love, in a way that she would never sit down and watch 30 Years in the TARDIS or Who's Doctor Who.
Here's a question, though. These stories, they're not the most exciting of stories. Does it hold the interest for 90 minutes? Because I'm not entirely sure it really does. Something like that for 60 minutes is a bit of fluff. It's basically a bit of Channel 5 fluff, isn't it?
Yeah.
90 minutes seems a bit ostentatious to me. I think they're hedging their bets. They're saying Doctor Who fans will watch this, so let's get half an hour's extra worth of adverts out of them.
It's part of a bigger series. They've done like 4 or 5 episodes or something on the scandals of other things as well.
Oh, right.
So, yeah, it's a bit of like mainstream guff with like convention anecdotes, I imagine, amped up to 10, dramatic music placed underneath them, like Sophie talks about nearly dying and stuff. And I think it'll probably get the 500 people that are watching very, it'll keep their attention for an hour or so.
Yeah, maybe. We should talk about the 3 episodes. Before we do, we've just had the conversation about the Daleks. Dylan, you and I had a conversation as well about the broadcast dates, which we've alluded to on previous sort of news episodes, but we've not actually had that conversation in person because, generally speaking, we can't get you for the news episodes because you're always so damn busy with your Emmy award-winning television series and stuff like that.
Sorry.
I love how we bring up the Emmy. Dylan never mentions it.
Oh, it's a bit like the Demons book, isn't it? Although Matt does bring that up, or he used to. He's a bit embarrassed about it now.
Yeah,
I mean,
one, he's outmatched to me.
But I think the sort of wider conversation about the viewing figures and about the broadcast days is more about, for me, it's more about what Stephen Moffat talked about when he talked about the BBC publishing Doctor Who. Because I don't know if you remember, but about a year before they announced that Doctor Who was moving to Sundays, I predicted it was going to happen. And the reason I predicted it was going to happen was because of what Stephen Moffat said about publication. So I'll give that context, and then maybe we'll have a talk about what's happening now and our thoughts about what might have been a better way to go or why it's gone this way or whatever. But if you remember, when Peter Capaldi was the Doctor, was when you kind of got the crashing viewing figures across television. So it wasn't Doctor Who. I think there was something interesting that happened that meant Doctor Who fell slightly quicker than some other programs for a little while, because they tried to program it against the rugby, and then they tried to squeeze it in between the live TV events on Saturdays. And that was not working. And I was looking at that and thinking, you know, Saturdays are not working for Doctor Who anymore. But what was happening at the time was Doctor Who was getting a live audience of about 1.5 million. It was getting an on the night audience of about 3 million or so. And then it was getting a final audience of 5 million, which meant that the catch up was actually well over half of the audience. But the post 24-hour, the sort of post on the night catch up, was accounting for about 2 million. And I looked at that and I thought, well, if I was the BBC and Doctor Who's getting 2 million people on post on the night catch up, what you should try and do is move it to a slot where the on the night audience gets a bump. And if you can keep the catch up audience, then the entire viewing figures for Doctor Who gets a bump. And actually, that did happen with the first Jodie Whittaker series. Then it tailed off again. But the point I think I'm making is thus: when Stephen Moffat talked about publishing Doctor Who, what has happened in the years since he made that comment is that there's been a proliferation of streaming services and audiences with smart TVs. The importance of the smart TV cannot be underestimated here. If people can put YouTube on their television set at the flick of a button, they're going to do that. They're going to watch stuff on YouTube far more than if they're just watching 3 minutes of this, 2 minutes of that on a tiny screen on a phone. If Netflix, Amazon Prime, Disney Plus, all these other services are on a button on your remote control on your television set, you're more likely to access them than when you had to go on your sort of desktop computer to watch iPlayer, right? Mm-hmm. So catch up has become incredibly important. Now, the other important question is, when do people catch up? Well, I mean, we live in an age where people's working habits are changing and have changed, but still, most people, especially in families, are home for the whole weekend. So people will do the vast majority of their television catching up between a Friday evening and a Sunday afternoon, basically. So if you publish something, if you broadcast something on a Friday night, essentially you've got 48 hours of an audience who might catch up with that thing over the weekend before they go to work. If you publish or broadcast something on a Sunday evening, any kids or parents who don't catch that thing on a Sunday probably won't get around to it on the Monday necessarily. By the Tuesday, they've got Monday's programs also in competition for their catch-up minutes. By the time you get to the following weekend, Friday or Saturday, Netflix, Disney Plus, Amazon Prime, Apple TV Plus have all broadcast and published new programs that are vying for that catch-up time the following weekend. In other words, when the BBC were broadcasting Doctor Who on a Sunday night, yeah, they got a bigger audience on the night, but that audience was obliterated in the catch-up, and the catch-up figures went from 2 million plus to 1 million minus. They more than halved. So just to bring it back to the broadcast of these 3 specials, I thought the sensible thing to do from that perspective was a Thursday, Friday, Saturday hit of the 3 episodes, 3 on the trot, because people tend to catch up with things when they're relevant, when they're in their mind, when they're enthused for something. And they tend to do it in batches of episodes rather than 1 episode of this, 1 episode of that, 1 episode of something else. They tend to save things up so they can watch 2 episodes or 3 episodes at a time. I thought if they did that Thursday, Friday, Saturday with Doctor Who, Friday night people would catch up with the Thursday episode and watch the Friday episode, and then Saturday night they're eager for the Saturday night episode, or they can do all 3 on the Sunday or whatever. By keeping it on Saturdays, I think Russell T Davies has missed a massive trick.
I understand they're also not wanting to sort of shoot your load straight away, like and have all these specials gone within a week. And I think what you miss by doing them in that row is you've then got a week's worth of publicity for each episode that you can do. Now, say there's a big cliffhanger at the end of episode 1, then you've got a week to drum up publicity for episode 2 and then for episode 3. So I don't know whether there's a right or wrong way to do it. I think we'll see afterwards. If those ratings are abysmal and people keep saying overnights don't matter anymore, but if they were abysmal, I bet you that there'd be a rethink by the time Shooty Gap was first season is broadcast as to how they do it. The other thing is, I wonder how. I think you're absolutely right in terms of there being so much competition, and after a few days you sort of forget about it. What we don't really know, and we're told all the time that Doctor Who does really well on iPlayer, how many people come to say something like Flux and binge it, but they don't binge it till 2 months later and do the whole series in a couple of days and things. That's, I guess, we don't quite know the sort of shelf life of these things now.
Got a fairly good idea because they did publish some figures, didn't they? But they just published general figures for this series as a whole. But I mean, it doesn't take a huge extrapolation to imagine that if there's, I can't remember what they said, was it something like 17 million downloads of Doctor Who within a 12-month period or something? Or I don't know if it was that many, but it was a crazily big figure that nobody expected in a year when there were basically no new Doctor Who episodes.
But that was for like all 13 series that were on iPlayer at the time, wasn't it?
My point is, or what I extrapolated from that is, that's probably slightly weighted towards the more recent episodes, with people catching up on the latest era of Doctor Who than the David Tennant episodes, which presumably all those people have already seen several times over. So I imagine, now I'm not going to say, oh, the David Tennant figures would have been down here and the Jodie Whittaker figures would have been up here, but I imagine they would have been somewhere like that. There would have been disparity between the eras. People tend to catch up on the things that they haven't watched. So those episodes where the viewing figures were lower would probably have been the ones that people were thinking, oh, I should catch up with that.
Yeah, I can see that. And we shouldn't underestimate the power of a streamer, and I include iPlayer in that, like having the iPlayer app.
Totally.
The amount of times, like earlier this year, I watched Narcos. I'd never seen Narcos. Everybody raved about it 8 or 9 years ago. And it was just because I was flicking through and I was like, oh, I'll give Narcos a go. And you people will be doing that on iPlayer with Doctor Who as well.
Totally. Yeah, you're right. And iPlayer from the start of smart TVs has been one of the buttons, hasn't it? Basically, it's been one of the main sort of things that you can stream through your television set. And these days, this is why we're sort of moving into that area where more and more the BBC are dropping a bunch of stuff just on iPlayer first and broadcasting it after the fact.
And also making their back catalogue available. And I'm not just talking about Doctor Who. They put the whole of Red Dwarf up there, including the ones they didn't make. So it's like, never underestimate I think iPlayer is a cracking streaming service that has all sorts of selections of movies and TV shows that you don't expect it to have.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, they do. They have quite a few movies as well, don't they? John, I'm aware we've been kind of ignoring you.
No, it's been good listen. But no, I mean, the other thing underestimated about iPlayer, it's one of the best apps out there. It's the most reliable service we've got, I think. And that does help a lot, because if you think this one's not going to fall over, and there's a huge selection of stuff on there. And I think you said it's Doctor Who is very, very prominent on that front page as well. That gives it a lot of prominence, particularly with the Whoniverse stuff.
And crucially, it's sort of, and it isn't, but it appears to be free, because once you've got your telly, and if you're living in the UK,
by license fee.
It's paid for by the license fee, so we do pay for it, although we pay for it probably less than we do for most of the other services. So we do pay for it, but crucially, we don't appear to pay for it. You don't pay a monthly iPlayer fee. You pay the license fee, whether you've got iPlayer or not. So iPlayer comes across like a free service almost.
Yeah.
Well, look at what Disney Plus is going up again in the new year, or just has gone up. So the BBC can really make a case of value for money again.
Oh, absolutely. Yes. Now, unless we've got more on that, I suppose the extrapolation as well from that conversation is Russell T Davies is very much in favour of Saturday nights, it seems. I think he's been a bit short-sighted there. I think Friday nights should be in consideration. I think Friday nights gives you twice as much catch-up time in the immediate vicinity of the episode. I think Friday nights should be in the conversation. But I think Russell T Davies is too tied in psychologically to Saturday nights to move. I think Saturday nights is a terrible night for Doctor Who these days, frankly.
Well, we will find out.
Yeah, I guess.
But I guess I would worry that, maybe worry is not the right word, that you get these specials and they're on a Saturday night and they do really well because it's 3 specials featuring the most popular Doctor, and then you get a false sense of security that works again, and then come Ncuti Gatwa's the debut episode, I'm sure will have big figures, but then you could see those figures petering off as people go, it's Saturday night and I'm doing something else and I'll try and catch up with it when I get a chance, but as you say, other things get in the way.
It wouldn't surprise me to see them move to Fridays for Ncuti's first season, because the thing with Saturday nights on British TV, the biggest thing on British TV pretty much reliably is Strictly. It's a ratings juggernaut. So you're plugging into the audience for that as well. Whereas when we get to March or whenever Ncuti's series goes out, there's not that. So you might well see it moving to Friday nights on that.
I mean, the thing of it is that psychologically, if Doctor Who is something that you're likely to sort of want to watch with your kids, Saturday night, there's so much going on nowadays that's not sort of scripted drama. But the weekend starts on Saturday morning, right? I mean, if you've got small kids, they're still going to have a relatively early bedtime on Friday night, I guess, for most families. The weekend really starts on a Saturday morning when you get a lie in and you get up and you've got nothing much to do necessarily. What better way to start the weekend than getting up, turning on the telly, opening up iPlayer and sticking on the new episode of Doctor Who?
Yeah.
Utterly makes sense to me. Psychologically, sort of emotionally makes sense to me.
Maybe we should schedule it for 9 a.m. on a Saturday morning.
I'm sure the Americans would have something to say about that. Let's talk about the 3 episodes then, I suppose. I mean, we know very little still about the middle one. I said my theory the other day. I think from the very little we've learned since then, that theory becomes slightly less likely, but it's still not impossible, about Wild Blue Yonder possibly being some kind of remake of Solaris, where there's a space station or something. There's ghosts of the Doctor's past. I think actually that makes a certain amount of sense given the Donna storyline, because you could tell a story where there's ghosts of the Doctor's pasts and future, hence Ncuti Gatwa being able to be a part of it. But there's no ghosts of Donna's future. So is Donna bound to die at the end of episode 3? That could be part of the storyline. But let's do them slightly in order. And I guess let's talk about kind of expectations we have from them. So people have seen, none of us have, but people have seen Star Beast now. And I think the general consensus is it's a lot of fun. It's taken everything that you wanted out of the comic strip that you potentially could have for a television adaptation, and it mixed it with everything that you would have wanted them to mix it with from the original sort of Tennant and Tate era. So I think the consensus is generally best of both worlds.
Yeah,
we think...
and I mean, to me, the thing with Tennant and Tate, whether you're a big fan of them or not, they lift that material, whatever you're looking for. So you're always going to get a kind of a reliable standard. It's like the fourth series. I don't particularly love a lot of those episodes, but you're happy to spend time with them. You know, you can watch these two being absolutely, you know, star power on the screen. This is what they do, and this is kind of the standard you'll get. And you apply it to, and Russell T Davies does like launching with those old stories, doesn't he? You know, with Rose, and he'll evoke them.
And he likes launching with something a bit.
Something there, Joe.
Oh yeah, but I'm going to cut. Sorry, I was going to say, just on your point about the things that Russell likes to launch with. He likes to launch with something light, but with a bit of substance, but also sometimes with a slightly mad twist. So you've got the the adipose, for example.
Yeah.
The Star Beast is essentially the sort of 2023 sort of riposte to the adipose in a way, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And it's
Dylan,
it's a good idea. Sorry, it's a really good idea because you've got this thing that you could imagine a cuddly toy of as well. It's this cute little thing.
Yeah.
Or not so cute, as we might find out.
Spoilers, John.
Imagine if the plot twist was it is actually just cute and they haven't gone for the whole evil beat the meat.
I think it's not called beat, though. It's not called beat according to certain people.
Oh, really?
Well, it's not named in the episode. I think it's just named the Meep. But
interesting.
Okay. I mean, but yeah, I saw a conversation somewhere though, and the twist as we know it is intact from what I can tell.
Yeah, no, I'm sure it is. I do know someone that was at the premiere, and they didn't give me any spoilers or anything like that because I just don't want any at this point. They said it's like Doctor Who in 2008. But with a big budget, and that they were quite shocked at how big the budget seemed like. And they didn't say there's lots of stuff from the trailers you haven't seen. It's just the scale of it feels bigger. But also, I just don't think it's got to be a big statement of intent for anybody that thinks Doctor Who's dead, that we're back. It can't afford to be rubbish, but I'm not expecting any huge twists or anything like. I'm expecting a straightforward retelling of the Star Beast with the woven in Donna thing to make it, you know, add a bit of heart to it. A few little twists and turns, but nothing that I don't think you would not predict.
Besides, it's Russell T Davies. He doesn't. I mean, and this is not a sort of criticism, but this goes back to our conversations on the RTD episodes we did. He doesn't really deal in unexpected things, does he? He deals in promising you something and then giving you a version of that thing that might not quite be the way you expected that thing to be. For instance, this is the day that Rose dies or whatever. But he will give you basically what you've asked for of him, because that's kind of just the sort of writer he is, really.
Yeah.
Do we think, I mean, this is the question then, I've just brought it up. Do we think he'll kill Donna off? I don't in a million years think he'll kill Donna off, but I mean, do either of you two think he'll do that?
I think...
No, I mean, God. Yeah, so go on, Dylan.
I think Donna will be absent, but this leads into something I think we should talk about at the end, about a seismic change coming to Doctor Who. So I don't think we'll see her back, but it's been announced that Yasmin Finney's back, so she's certainly, I would imagine, away from that part of the storytelling.
Right. The Rose Tyler twist, Parallel Earth at the
exactly
end of,
that sort of thing.
It won't be that, but it'll be along those lines, probably. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, Russell, I don't think he'd want to say no, Catherine Tate can't come back, because if she's eager to come back again, he would quite happily bring her back on board and past evidence.
I mean, what about that thing of Donna can keep her memories, but she has to be somewhere else in order to keep her memories, so she's dead to her family, essentially. Again, it's that Rose Tyler twist of the day I die.
Yeah, that would certainly have the ring of truth about it. Wild Blue Yonder, then, we know very little other than he said it's basically set at the sort of far distant end of wherever the far distant end of anything could possibly be.
He said it's brand new ground for Doctor Who. He said they've not
Yep.
they've not told a story like this. They said it's creepy but not scary. The next episode is the scary one, apparently. I did a podcast on this a while ago, speculating what it could be, and I've since revised my speculation because I think everybody was going, "Oh, this is loads of past Doctors and things like that." And I know that some people here may know who these 3 mysterious guest stars are. I do not, but I'm being prepared to be disappointed by. I have a number of theories, but I'm prepared to be disappointed.
No. The 3 mysterious guest stars. I'm not going to spoil who they are, but they are not names associated with nostalgia.
Oh, that's interesting. Because the one speculation was they're just big stars, and I mean, why would you hold back big stars?
They're not big stars either. It's basically, I mean, it was just okay. 3 names got not revealed. Those 3 names are just the kind of names that you'd sort of read on the sort of page 3 of the Gallifrey Guardian and think, oh, do I remember them from something? Basically, it's, I mean, not entirely, because I don't want to spoil it or not spoil it. I don't want to reveal a hand. So not entirely, but no, those 3 names are not associated with nostalgia. And it's not like John Hurt sort of type names either.
Interesting. Because the other theory was a sort of Zagreus situation where you might get a Doctor playing a different part, which sort of goes into that Solaris style thing of, you know, you could cast people in certain roles, but who knows? I'll find out. But my anticipation I've reduced considerably, and I'm looking forward to seeing what it is. But
I think if there were people, say Peter Davison, for instance, has a part in it, I don't think they would have given the name anyway. That would be a surprise.
Yeah.
So that wouldn't be a name that was on the table to be talked about.
As long as it's not Carol Ann Ford, I'm fine.
What's Carol Ann Ford ever done to you?
Shakedown Return of the Sontarans.
When Russell T Davies says this story takes Doctor Who into territory it's never been in before, I assume he means in the same way as Midnight did.
Yeah.
In other words, he's come up with a concept, a Stephen Moffat style concept, and he's made a story about this concept. But I can imagine that the majority of the episode probably will be very recognisable Doctor Who, frankly, because there's a lot of hyperbole who comes about talking about these episodes from sort of those quarters, isn't there? So yeah. I wonder how much that's hyperbole.
I kind of do like the way they're building up through the absence of information on this, though. It's a very kind of nice way of doing it when the other ones have a ton of hype about them. Just in the middle, what is it?
See, the thing about Midnight is that came completely by surprise because we knew very little about it beforehand. We just knew there was going to be a bunch of people on a bus, and basically this story, whatever it was, would take place on this bus. And when the repeated word thing, I mean, can you remember the first time you saw Midnight and the repeated word thing started to come up? You had no idea that was going to happen, I don't think. And so that was a real, oh, is that where this episode's going? You couldn't have predicted that.
Yeah,
I suspect whatever's going on in Wild Blue Yonder would be well, you couldn't have predicted that thing, which is why I'm absolutely 100% predicting it will be Solaris.
I have another movie reference that I want to throw in there that I think it could be.
Rocky?
No,
seriously?
Cube. You know the film Cube?
Oh yeah.
Maybe one of the sequels, like the Hypercube one. They've said everything is they said nearly every shot is an effect shot. And I wonder whether it's about a big space station that moves around in time, which again sort of feeds into the Solaris thing, moves in time and geography.
Horns of Nymon. The rooms are all in different places.
Is one of those names not revealed? Is it a CGI Graham Crowden? Is that what it is?
Can't possibly say. The third one then is the Toymaker one. So we've got one that's an adaptation of a comic strip, which, I mean, that's odd in itself that Russell T Davies is returning with an adaptation of somebody else's material. I suppose he's Russell T Davies singing it. And we did talk about this before, talk about the fact that Rose is not a million miles away from Spearhead from space. But it does feel slightly odd that this is not just nominally taking somebody else's material, but is actually crediting somebody else, as having originally written that material. That seems like a slightly odd thing for Russell T Davies to do, but I guess also he's the kind of guy who says, right, this is what I want to do, so let's just do it, regardless of what the optics are on that.
I wonder whether, not that he needed a story quickly, but I wonder whether his initial thing was, I'd love to do an episode, and he had an idea, and maybe that is the giggle or something. And then they were like, well, could you do 3? And so it's like, well, I've got this idea of a second. What's the first one? You come up with an idea. It sounds a lot like the Star Beast, and you just go, I'm a Doctor Who fan, let's make it the Star Beast.
Or you come up with an idea for a single episode, and somebody says, well, let's do this for the anniversary. And then you think, well, how can we make this more universally Doctor Who from the entire 60 years? Let's bring back a character. So maybe the giggle wasn't the Toymaker, but was Russell T Davies' own creation.
Yeah.
And he says, okay, let's use the Toymaker from the 1960s. Let's use the Star Beast from the 1980s. Maybe that's how it happened.
And we've sort of, the Star Beast is more associated with the 70s, even though it was an 80s comic. But I think most people think of Tom Baker and that guy.
I guess. Yeah.
So it's so you kind of get this thing of, actually, there are elements from the 60s, 70s, and 80s returning, even if it isn't CGI John Pertwee somewhere.
You telling me that the spaceship in Wild Blue Yonder is the spaceship Terminus?
No, it's the one the Master put the Daleks put the Master on trial on in the TV movie.
Sharda. It's Sharda.
It's Shakedown. It's Shakedown again. Come on, it's Shakedown.
Do you know what? If it wasn't for the fact that it's Douglas Adams, and so presumably the rights would be a bit of a mess and/or expensive, Sharda is the most obvious thing for the modern series to do, isn't it? Yeah. Not the story, but the place, to use the place, to use the idea. Such an obvious idea.
I'm surprised that Sharda wasn't the prison in, what was it, Revolution of the Daleks?
Yeah. Again,
it looked like it.
Yeah, but it's that, isn't it? Yeah. It's like, let's do a prison in space. Shall we call it Sharda? No, because if we do that, it's going to cost us a lot of this, and there'll be rights issues and all sorts. So let's just do a prison in space and not call it Sharda. Mm. The third episode, the Toymaker. I mean, Russell T Davies is all about the optics, isn't he? Marrying the two black characters from 2005 series off to each other at the end of 2009 or whatever it was. He makes some funny choices, so he's brought back the most racist character in the entire history of Doctor Who.
No.
He's not racist.
I don't think it is. I don't think it's a racist character. I think, do you know what? Here's my theory. The Doctor Who writing team comes up with a character called the Celestial Toymaker. In other words, a Toymaker from space. Somebody in the design team looks at that, says the Celestial Toymaker. Celestial also means from the Orient. Let's put him in a Mandarin costume.
That's pretty much been confirmed. Apparently, there's no mention in the script of him being dressed like a Mandarin. I think it's unfortunate that it's also tied in with the episode where they say an unspeakable thing,
The N-word gets used. Yes.
It's just that Jim Curry Smith has done some brilliant stuff. He's meant to be an Orientalist. He's meant to be this collector. So he's someone who appropriates stuff. So he is essentially what they're criticizing for. That's what he's doing. He's not racist.
Do you know, this always gets me when people, because there are some people out there who want to find things to have a bee in their bonnet about, right? So they look for things. So, I mean, and when there are genuine things, clearly it's good to have your bee in your bonnet about genuine things. But every now and again, people will look. So one of the things people get a bee in their bonnet about is, you've made these villains racists. You can't have racists on tellies. Yes, you can have racists on tellies when they're the villains and you're talking about the fact that they're racists. Of course you can. But you know what I mean? It's like the writer must be a racist if he made the villain a racist.
It's the equivalent to those people that shout at soap stars on the street because their characters are baddies in the show.
Exactly. So this always got me.
On the other hand, we do know that Neil Patrick Harris puts on a terrible German accent at one point. So,
yes, quite. So it's like choose your targets, I guess. I suppose. But. Let's talk about the fact. So, are we happy to see the Toymaker back? Is probably the question we should ask. not just because he's a recurring character, but because of the nature of the character, a character who can sort of bend time and space.
I think there's some interesting things to be done with the Toymaker that definitely weren't done the first time round or in the Nightmare Fair when that was written. So, and it's great casting, and I think you can do something really interesting. And there's certain things from the trailer, like, you know, Kate is in unit, but there's like a wooden door behind her, and then there's all that thing with like the roses and stuff. So I'm assuming this is someone that can really manipulate time, space, matter, which I think there's some interesting stuff to do there. So, and I'm presuming he's the reason that the Doctor's got this face again.
Yes, that is a question that I wonder if, a little bit like the whole Stephen Moffat, why does this sort of Peter Capaldi Doctor look like a character he's met before thing, and Russell T Davies comes up with an idea, and to be honest, the way it's executed is quite nice, but it's certainly very inessential. The whole let's get Tennant and Tate back takes precedence over, but why would the Doctor be in an old face, which doesn't mean that that's not going to be addressed in some way. So I've lowered my expectations considerably over the sort of value of that expectation, of that explanation rather, because I know that explanation is going to be secondary to the return of Tennant and Tate as actors to something that they wanted to do. So having said that, I nevertheless, I think it's in Russell T Davies's wheelhouse to come up with an explanation that's utterly mad. And I think, as we've established over the many, many years of this podcast, I'll take mad over sensible.
Absolutely.
Either of you two got thoughts on that, or on the episode, on the Toymaker? John, I didn't really ask you about the Toymaker. Are you happy to see him back? It back?
Yeah. Again, say it's something that is it's a nice little showcase for Michael Gough in the original. It's there to kind of conceal that, you know, William Hartnell isn't going to really carry a show on its own. So you've got an actor there who will carry a show, and yeah, you've got an actor who is capable of playing big without looking daft, and it's kind of a big villain, and it allows Russell T Davies to play with that budget he's got, the big visuals, that big story, and it's a fairly easy character to understand, because, you know, you've got the godlike adversaries from Marvel, for instance, who can manipulate reality. You know, Thanos blinking at half the human race, for instance. That's the scale of villain. I think it's an announcement of the scale of Doctor Who Russell T Davies is going to want to do, particularly when he's back, got it, writing it regularly. So yeah, it's basically Doctor Who as a movie almost, which I'm looking forward to. And the Toymaker really does fit that.
Yeah.
Do we think, on a slightly sort of, not a tangential, but just slightly off the topic, do we think that there's some potential that they might have arranged some kind of Michael Gough cameo stroke tribute in some way?
He says it in the SFX magazine. He says,
does he?
Yes. There's a flashback.
Yeah.
Oh no, I meant something slightly more than that, because in order to use something more than a flashback, but a sort of an animated Michael Gough in some way, they need to seek somebody's permission, right? But I'm just thinking, well, whose permission would they need to seek? Would it be Annika Wills?
No, they got divorced years and years ago.
But was he married again afterwards? Because if he wasn't, then potentially it could still be Annika Wills, couldn't it?
I think he was married again. And
he was, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Was he? Oh, fair enough. I just wondered if it was down to Annika Wills, whether they, as a kind of a tribute, couldn't have had a part where Michael Gough, you know, an animated Michael Gough kind of walks into, or, you know, something like the mirror scene from Power of the Daleks, where Patrick Troughton sees William Hartnell. You could have an animated scene. When I say animated, I don't mean like cartoon, but a scene where you've got a mirror and, you know, for example, Neil Patrick Harris walks past the mirror, but we see Michael Gough in the reflection, something like that.
Potentially.
Because I'd love to see that, I think.
Yeah, me too. I think everybody looked at the second special as perhaps being the nostalgia-filled one, And again, I'm not implying that this is a big multi-Doctor story or anything like that, but I think from what we know about a certain returning character who's not been announced but was in the Disney Plus trailer, that perhaps you
Does
might
he have the initials BC?
BC, but no.
No.
Oh, okay,
Well,
somebody else.
Yes, but I think this might be one that has a few more throwbacks to the past. Although, actually, I'm going to change my mind here. I do think it's a multi-Doctor story, but those Doctors are Tennant and Gatwa. I think Gatwa plays an integral part in this story. I have no rumours or anything like that, but I think he's part of the plot.
Ghost of the Future. I like it.
Yeah. See, that goes with my sort of Solaris or Solaris adjacent speculation, is that if it's Ghosts of the Past, it will also be Ghosts of the Future, and that will be Ncuti Gatwa, and that will be why the sort of Catherine Tate thing comes to the fore, because if there's no Ghost of the Future of Donna, but there's a Ghost of Donna's past or something, then that can become part of the storyline, I suppose. Right, I think we've been banging on for long enough. Is there more?
There is a little bit more. Ross
Go on,
T.
then.
Davis spent 2 pages in Doctor Who magazine talking about the seismic changes that have happened in Doctor Who, perhaps preparing us for something big. And I'm actually wondering whether, again, no inside knowledge, not reading forums and things like that, whether by the end of this episode, Ncuti Gatwa is a brand new first Doctor in a new universe.
Yes.
Memories erased. I don't know what it is, but I wonder by the end of it whether we are now looking at a clean slate in a way that we've never seen before.
This is the rumour that came out about the church on Ruby Road, isn't it?
I don't know. I don't know whether I haven't seen that one. I saw a brief plot synopsis a while ago, but I don't know anything about that. But he's preparing us for, I think, a clean slate in some way, shape, or form. But we shall see.
Yeah, maybe. I think in some ways, I think that would be. Well, I mean, as always with these things, I am happy if they do it in a way that I like, or they do it well.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? I don't think there's anything that should be off the table. I think everything should be on the table. But I also do think that if Russell T Davies leaves it so that Ncuti Gatwa, because this is the rumour, is that Ncuti Gatwa is the first in a new sort of generation of Doctors, a sort of parallel sort of generation of Doctors, and that would leave David Tennant as the extant, last and still living final Doctor of the first generation of Doctors. Yeah. And so you'd basically leave the door open for Tennant to come back anytime he wants. That feels to me like 100% something RTD would do. In fact, he did it before when he left a human version of David Tennant on a sort of parallel world, which was, as we'd seen many times, accessible from the real world. He didn't actually go back to that, but he could easily have done. So it's not like he doesn't have previews on this. I just think he did that before. Doing it again would just be repeating himself again, and it would be repeating himself with the same actor again. It would. He could do it really well. I just think
it'd be like Oprah with their cars. Russell T.'s companions. You get a doctor, and you get a doctor, and you get a doctor.
But it's that whole scene on the beach at the end with the human Doctor saying goodbye and taking Rose with him. It just, oh God, I don't know if I could go through that again.
I also fundamentally think for a bigger audience on Disney Plus around the world, they need to have, even if it's not resetting the character of the Doctor, they need to reset everybody else, because this is an Earth that's used to alien invasions and everybody knows what Daleks are and things like that. So we know that UNIT play a big role in the next series, but it doesn't mean they know the Doctor or the Doctor knows them.
Using the 3 specials as a way of finishing Doctor Who and restarting Doctor Who is potentially a great idea.
I think so.
Yeah.
I just think it's in the execution, and we'll see how the execution goes on it.
I'm just really interested in how he writes Church on Ruby Road, because it's got so much to do for different audiences.
Yeah.
But then again, we know the big Disney Plus push isn't going to come presumably until after the Church on Ruby Road, or at least that's what they've said. So, I mean, I'm not sure whether they weren't just being slightly odd with the language, and it does come with Church on Ruby Road, or whether it comes with the series itself. But
Yeah,
maybe that Christmas special can be the place where the whole reset thing, if there's going to be a whole reset thing, maybe that Christmas special is where the reset happens, so that you start the series kind of slightly in situ. I mean, most television series start in situ, right? The first episode of most television series isn't an origin story. So you start the television series in situ,
yeah.
but you have the opportunity to go into your Disney Plus app and find the origin story to watch if you want.
Yeah, possibly. I mean, we talked about Rose being the way in for an audience on the previous era. Maybe Ruby isn't the way in for the audience. There may be other characters there and that are in, and Ruby and the Doctor drop in already with a established relationship.
Right. On that note, it's dinner time, and I definitely need to get out of this room.
Oh,
so I think
you
we'll
had beans
call it.
before you went in.
There's plenty more to talk about, no doubt, but there'll be plentiful opportunities for us to do that over the next few weeks. So we'll call it a night for now, and we'll come back, and who knows, we might even do a second preview before the specials come out, because it's that kind of a month, right? Until those things happen. I was JR.
I was Dylan.
And I was John.
And we will speak again soon.